Today I attended an event called Courageous Conversations, and I wanted to take some time to reflect on this event and my experience. So, um, so I generally like to take it in and sort of reflect on what it was that impacted me the most about an event. Um, I like to be prayerful and intentional about actually writing it out if I need to, or even just share my thoughts with others. Um, but today I actually got kind of personal. I shared a little bit about my experience with community organizing, electoral politics, um, and some of my experiences in electoral politics, and some of my traumas, because that's exactly what it is. But I led with a month ago, came back from my time in Arizona. I was out there campaigning for Biden and decided I was done with electoral politics when someone came to their door and cocked their shotgun. And so then I talked a little bit about my time as a community organizer and my time as out in the field pounding on doors here locally for state, county, and city races. And then started talking about how painful it's been to be Catholic in the Diocese of Orange, and how I've really wrestled with being a Catholic here, in light of my own political beliefs or sort of thoughts that I've been putting out, let's say, since 2016. A lot of that is because, well, that's about the time I started really getting politically active here locally. But at the time, I was in conversation with a lot of organizers throughout the country, and I was also very much in conversation with white organizers and white folks in general that were thinking about, well, how do I contribute to this work? And I don't know why I took it upon myself to explore this with other white organizers. I think in large part it's because I was asking a lot of the same questions that they were asking, and much of that has to do with how I've been perceived in the past. I've been constantly reminded that, hey, you're white passing, like you have no right to comment on such and such, or like your job is to listen and not share too much or overshare. Your job is to listen, and a lot of that didn't quite sit well with me, but it was it's been a journey, to say the least. But it was interesting because in those spaces, in those political spaces, I didn't quite feel like I could contribute to the best of my ability. But then I'd walk into Catholic spaces, and there again, I kind of felt like, okay, well, I can't quite contribute here either. I had to basically disown, or better yet, how about this? A lot of people disowned me, or, a better way to put it is actually we disowned each other, mostly because at the time, of course, I was taking a lot of heat, particularly from white conservative Catholic men, and it just was what it was. And actually, it was quite painful to go through that experience, and left a terrible taste in my mouth. And but the question remained, like, how do I have an important conversation with these folks given the fact that, well, it's Orange County and like it's predominantly white. And not only is it white, it's predominantly white conservative, I would say either evangelical or Catholic. And so it's like, I can't really get away from that, right? Especially if I want to engage others outside of the Latino community. Well, of course, there's a pretty huge group of Vietnamese folks, and I'm well in touch with that culture as well. And I speak Vietnamese actually, and studied abroad, and so I would say have also taken time to be thoughtful in my interactions with that community. And so, it's kind of like, this is how I think. I try to think about, well, let's establish a baseline of understanding and a common language for discussing conflict or addressing conflict or sort of talking through otherwise controversial issues that, are going to come up inevitably. Like, this is the beauty of dialogue, but we need to have a baseline for respect and understanding. And we need to have a common language too. I think that's huge. That is so huge. And what is not fair is to say, well, your experiences and your feelings and what you bring to the table, like none of that stuff matters. So get out of here, or let me, I call it nuke your house, where basically like you're told how much of a moron you are for thinking what you think or for sharing your experiences. It's like, oh, here we go again, the poor victim immigrant guy or whatever, like there's a sort of visceral reaction that people get when you try to speak to, some of the hardships of those closest to the pain, and that's that's not the type of conversation that I like am excited about. Like, I don't really care for that, but I also understand that a lot of people don't really care to have conversations like that, like where you're actually trying to arrive at some sort of common ground. It's like, what the hell for? What the hell for? What's there to gain from that other than, like, let's say a relationship, unless there's already like a reason for it, like, oh, like I am, like, there's a particular like thing ask, right, of that person, like I'm networking, and so I'm trying to squeeze the most out of this interaction in the shortest amount of time, and I want you to tell me everything about your line of work, and who else can I talk to that's in your line of work, and so forth, right? It's a very specific conversation, and that's a strategic one, of course, but if what you're doing is trying to meet the other person where they are, and also be thoughtful in your responses, and also share from your heart. If that's what you're trying to do, then that requires a lot more patience and love, charity, and it requires a lot of truth telling. Like, what do you actually believe? Who actually are you? Obviously the tendency is to use your head, to use logic for a lot of political discussions, and that's very valuable too. And something that came up tonight was, well, what about the heart? Not just appealing to the logos or to logic, but appealing to the ethos and the feelings. And I value that. I think that's absolutely important. I think stories are huge, and there's nothing like, for me anyway, there's nothing like hearing the stories of others, it's tiring as all hell. I mean, it really just is. But the reward at the end of that is like, man, wow, I know this person through and through, and what an incredible gift. It creates that sort of intimacy, that sort of closeness, that I would say a lot of us shy away from. I think there's a lot of reservations around that too, because you're not sure if you're going to hit a landmine of sorts, right? Because in the midst of someone sharing their story, there's the possibility of them sharing something that's so deeply personal that now that creates some sort of trauma bonding, right? And I think a lot of people don't really know what to do with that. That can be very tricky, let's say, because it brings up, it's a form of intimacy that can also turn into sexual energy. And so then we get into boundaries and relationship dynamics, and how do you respect that connection, and it's just complex, let's say. But I think that when you approach a subject with a sort of sincerity and a sort of sacredness, I really think this is the way forward. But again, that assumes that we have the disposition and the energy and the time. And it also assumes that we have worked through enough of our own stuff, let's say, to where we can not only share but receive. You see, it's like if we have not given ourselves the opportunity to be seen, but it's like, what secrets are you hiding? It's like, what are you so deeply insecure about, and what are you so unwilling to share, and why? Like, what would it take for you to open up? And that, I would say, is a gift, and that's not something that happens overnight, really. So I get that it does take some processing and also like sharing maybe the same story over and over and over again until you can add layers to that story and add complexity to that story, right? So like, I don't just stop at, well, I'm 33 years old, my name's Hugo, I'm Latino, I live in Santa Ana, right? Those are basic pieces of information that I can share with other people. But then it gets a little more complex than that. And I lived in Mexico for 3 years, and I speak 3 languages, and and I've had incredible experiences abroad. I studied in Vietnam, I traveled throughout Europe, I studied political science when I was, and you kind of build on that. Obviously, that'll bring up a ton of stuff once you start sharing your life with others, like, and also like being mindful of how much and how much we share intentionally, and that, I would say, is also a challenge. I think it's like we need boundaries, in what we decide to share, how much we decide to share, and to whom we share it with. So obviously there are specific types of conversations, and this particular conversation was around political discourse. But notice it goes back to the same question of, what is your personal story? And I'm very grateful for my job as a community organizer. I think this is something that OCO, Orange County Congregation Community Organization, really helped me with. And also, so my trainings with PICO, people in community organizing. At the time, it was that, and now it's faith in action. But also, I've written what is called an autobiographical statement through my application process with the Jesuits. And so anyway, maybe I can devote more time to talking about that experience as a whole. But I think the idea is like discovering your own story, sharing your own story, and in so doing, you give others the space and you give others the you give others the opportunity to do the same. Of course, a big part of it is being a good steward of the space, such that you're not hogging the space. That's huge. At any rate, this is a matter of telling our own personal story and also daring to be vulnerable within, of course, boundaries. You don't want to throw up on a person. So you might bump into that, of course, and that's just a normal part of sharing your life with other people and being intentional. I call those vulnerability hangovers. Those are real, and that happens when you maybe go an inch further and share a piece of you that's like, man, that was really vulnerable of me, and that was courageous, but now I'm like, I really want to hide, because that was, oh damn, they know more about me than I probably should have shared, or I probably didn't want to share, but it came out, and that's just what it was. So that's what it is. Political discourse is not easy. Look, at the end of the day, 70 million Americans voted for Trump, and 70 million and one people voted for Biden. I don't know the exact figures, but the point is there's going to be plenty of healing ahead of us, and plenty of fighting for truth and justice and love, and that's gonna be a lot of and honestly fighting for your survival. like where's the lie, right? A lot of things aren't gonna change, but it doesn't mean we don't work for change. And I would say that on an everyday sort of level, we work for change through or with each other at an interpersonal level. Of course, we can talk about the macro policy and so forth, even organizational, sort of the meso. But I guess so. Like right now, I'm mostly sharing about the interpersonal level of sharing. So, at any rate, if you found this video helpful, click like, or give me a like, and I would love to hear your feedback. Would love to hear what your thoughts are on this topic, what your comments are, any questions or concerns you might have about this. Just in general, just love to hear from people, and hope that I can be responsive to everyone that watches this. Thanks again.